I didn't say anything more about it. As she got back to her conversation with her family, I quietly texted all of my family members present not to drink from the punch bowl. Very shortly after we had finished eating, people began to make toasts to us. It was then that whatever George put into the punch bowl kicked in. Almost at the exact same time, entire tables of people were vomiting all over the place. The room quickly became full of the smell of hot vomit. Because I had sent out that text message of warning to my family, it was only Alyssa's that was vomiting. Your wedding is supposed to be the happiest day of your life, right? Well, for me, it was the day that my life was ruined. I was so excited to spend the rest of my life with the love of my life, Alyssa. She was my high school sweetheart, and we kept dating all throughout college. I loved her so much and couldn't imagine living my life without her. After I graduated college, I realized that I wanted her in my life forever. Before I could propose to her, I had to make sure that I could provide for the two of us. I worked hard and got a promotion at my job. I was the youngest manager there. Everyone there was impressed with my work and wanted me to lead their teams. One of my bosses liked me so much that he even wanted me to take his position after he retired. I was set. With my finances secure, I knew that I could marry Alyssa in good conscience. We could afford a house and a family now. There was only one issue. We had gone through a lot over the years and had our fair share of fights, but we would always pull through them, stronger than ever. The only thing that continued to concern me was her father. Alyssa was a total daddy's girl, and I was never good enough in his eyes. I was a Navy SEAL for 30 years before I retired. I know how to protect and provide for my daughter. I know that as soon as there's any danger, you wouldn't be able to protect her. You're such a shrimp. I doubt you can even take a punch or protect my daughter from thieves. You look so weak. I absolutely can take care of her. I'm the youngest manager at my company, and I'm guaranteed a CEO position as soon as my boss retires. I don't care how much money you make. Alyssa is always well taken care of financially because of me. When I die, I won't be able to protect her anymore. She'll always have access to money, but not protection. You need to get your ducks in a row, son. I will never allow my daughter to be with someone like you. It would always bug me that Alyssa would be there for most of these fights. I thought that after all we had been through together, she would at least defend me. All she would do is shrug apologetically or avoid my eyes. It was almost as if she agreed with him. Why don't you ever defend me to him?
I agree with some of the things he has to say. I don't agree with how he says it, but I would feel safer if you were, bigger. If there was someone that I knew who was bigger and made as much money as you, I'd be with them. I've just known you the longest, so it's easiest for me right now.
You would leave me for someone who was bigger than me? Do you not love me?
Oh, don't be hysterical, Ryan. Of course I do. I'm joking, obviously. It's not a big deal. Stop overreacting. If you were a real man, this wouldn't be an issue in the first place.
That was when I understood that if it ever came for her to choose between me and her father, she would always pick him over me. It broke my heart, but I tried not to think about it. I proposed to her anyways, and she accepted. On the day of the wedding, all of our families were there. I was filled with so much joy. I saw a lot of my family members that I hadn't seen in years. They were all congratulating me on how lucky I was to be marrying Alyssa. The ceremony was beautiful. I will never forget how breathtaking she looked in her white dress as she walked down the aisle. Tears welled in my eyes as I saw her. I tried my best to ignore the daggers George was staring at me from the left side of the room. His face was blood red, and his knuckles were white from grabbing the seat in front of him so tightly. Even though there was music playing, I could still hear him grumbling angrily to himself. I did my best to put him out of my mind. We said our vows to each other, kissed, and were married. Everyone except George cheered. At the reception was where everything went south. As I was sitting next to Alyssa, I noticed George standing by the punch bowl rather suspiciously. He was hovering around it nervously and looking around to see if anyone was watching him. He saw that I was watching and smiled at me. I tapped Alyssa on the shoulder to point out how suspicious her father was being, but she ignored me. She was too busy chatting away with her maid of honor. I watched him closely. He gave me a wink before tapping a brown powder into the drink and quickly stirred it with a ladle. He wiped the remaining residue on his pants before walking away. Surely he didn't poison the punch, right? Alyssa, your psychotic father just put something in the fruit punch bowl.
What? No, he didn't. He would never do that. You can't just make up lies about my father. He's your father too now. Get over yourself.
I didn't say anything more about it. As she got back to her conversation with her family, I quietly texted all of my family members present not to drink from the punch bowl. Very shortly after we had finished eating, people began to make toasts to us. It was then that whatever George put into the punch bowl kicked in. Almost at the exact same time, entire tables of people were vomiting all over the place. The room quickly became full of the smell of hot vomit. Because I had sent out that text message of warning to my family, it was only Alyssa's that was vomiting. Her family came up with the idea that it was me who had poisoned the punch. Alyssa became so angry with me and wouldn't listen to anything that I had to say. I tried to convince her that it was her father. "I saw him do it, Alyssa!" I yelled. Alyssa's distant relatives rose from their seats with George leading them against me.
You can't marry someone who poisons your family and then blames it on your father.
I knew you weren't good enough to be with me. What kind of person does this?
I told you he was up to no good, Pumpkin. Under the pressure from all of her family, Alyssa took me to court the next day and divorced me. I was married for a total of 12 hours, and I was absolutely devastated. Her father came by the house to take all of her things. He was gleeful as he packed all her things away, getting rid of the life the two of us had together for the past 9 years. I couldn't believe how little she trusted me after everything we had gone through together. When he was done packing everything, he turned to me with that smile of his that I had come to hate so deeply and said to me, "I told you I'd never allow it." I was miserable for a very long time after that. She had been in my life for so long, and it was hard to adjust to the hole she had left in my life without her. Luckily, I had my brother by my side. He never liked Alyssa, and was glad that we didn't work out. "You deserve so much better than her," he told me. Against my wishes, he would set me up on blind dates to get over her as quickly as possible. Soon, I met a girl who was Alyssa's complete opposite. She was kind to me, loved how I looked, and best of all, her father adored me. It wasn't long until the two of us got married and had 2 beautiful baby boys. My wife decided to name one after me and one after her father. A couple of years went by, and my boss finally retired. I was made CEO of the company, and I moved our little family to a nice quiet beach town on the East Coast. I would have never thought I would ever be this happy or this wealthy. One day, I was going to the local coffee shop to get my morning coffee. I had the boys with me in the stroller. Before I walked in the building, I saw a homeless woman sitting outside on the ground. She was in ragged clothing and held a tin cup in her hands. Her hair was in shambles and looked like a rat's nest. I became slightly protective of my children and tried to hurry in the shop.
Ryan?
Alyssa!
I'm so glad I found you. I heard through the grapevine that you had moved over here, so I came over here to beg for you to come back. I know what my father did at the wedding.
She explained to me that years after the wedding fiasco, George got drunk at a family reunion and confessed that he was the one who had poisoned the punch. After this drunken outburst, the entire family turned against him and his daughter, refusing to speak to either of them. One of George's brothers actually was so upset that he pressed charges against him. George was originally sentenced to 4 years, but got into a prison fight within the first week. He was stabbed by another inmate, and he fought back in retaliation. He's now facing life in prison. As for Alyssa, she went on to marry someone that her father set her up with. The person that her father chose was also mentally unstable and would beat her. She managed to get a divorce, but he somehow won. She was responsible for paying him alimony. Everyone heard about how she had pinned the wedding poisoning on me, and no one wanted anything to do with her anymore. She couldn't find work or another husband. She was forced to sell her house and declare bankruptcy. She had been homeless for years. After she explained her story to me, she looked at my children in the stroller and smiled sadly.
If you think about it, it kind of is your fault. All you had to do was listen to my father and just better yourself so that you could provide for me like a real man would have. That's all you needed to do. You drove me to my father, and he turned out to be insane. You were the one who abandoned me, Ryan.
I gave you everything you needed, I provided you with food, put a roof over your head, and wasted the best years of my life on you. I'm happily married to a wife who loves me and have 2 beautiful children. The fact that you followed me across the country here speaks of how insane you are. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The only time I saw Alyssa after that was on the news. She died from an overdose in the streets a couple of weeks later. News of her passing reached her father in prison, and he was so depressed that no one will be visiting him behind bars. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. That is, until I had had enough. Both Toby and my mother showed up late one night and began pounding on my door and screaming that I was an ungrateful and useless son, and started destroying things outside my house. I had been expecting them to show up and had bought a taser gun. As quickly as I could, I opened the front door to my house. When they saw me with a gun, they started running. But I chased after them and tased them both. By the time they were recovering, the police had shown up, and they were finally able to arrest them. Hey there, my name is Kai, and I have a very unique situation. You see, when I was very young, my mother Tanya wasn't very responsible. And as a result, my sister Tasha and I ended up going and living with our grandmother Kathy. From time to time, our mother would come and visit, but the purposes for her visits were always for some ulterior motive. Usually it was because she needed money, but she always tried to pretend she was doing it because she missed us. Which of course she didn't.
Hey guys, it's great to see you. Hey Tanya, to what do we owe the pleasure of your company? It's been a while and I wanted to see you guys.
Mama!
Hey kids! Tanya, what is the real reason that you are here? Well, yes, if you can spare some cash. I'm a little low.
My grandmother rolled her eyes, but eventually did give my mother some money. Quite literally, shortly after she was given money, my mother left. Sadly, it was always like that. She would come and ask our grandmother for money, and then leave shortly thereafter. It always felt bad to know that our mother never came to visit for us. She was only ever interested in getting money from our grandmother, and then moved on. As we grew up, the visits were far more focused on just getting money, and our mother became more honest about what she was visiting us for. Even the few times that we've seen her on holidays, it was all the same thing. Hey Mama, Merry Christmas!
Yeah, whatever. Hey Mom, I need money. More? You came last month and asked for money. What do you need it for? Mind your own business. Just give me the money.
Eventually, I stopped wishing that my mother would come and visit. I realized that she clearly didn't care about my sister and I, but only ever wanted money. As I grew up, I came to realize that my mother had drug problems and that she needed the money to pay for her habit. Knowing that did humanize her, but that didn't really make it any better. When I was 15, we had a huge scare. The police called my grandmother and told her that they had found my mother passed out in the streets. She had overdosed and nearly died on the street. For a few weeks afterwards, she was in and out of the hospital.
Hey, listen to me. I need money. Tanya, what makes you think that we would give you money? You need help, not money so that you can get more drugs. You bitch, just give me what I want.
We were forced to call the police on her, and after a struggle in which our mother broke an officer's nose. The cops then used their batons to knock her unconscious. It was incredibly embarrassing. After that, we didn't hear from our mother for many years. During those years, Tasha and I grew up and went off to school. Our grandmother helped us pay for school to make our lives much easier. Both of us passed our courses with flying colors and even managed to find very good jobs. Once we were doing well for ourselves, we moved out, but we would visit our grandmother often. One day, though, we went home and found our grandmother had passed away. She had had a heart attack in the middle of the night and passed away. We were heartbroken, but we had always known that this would happen one day. Luckily, she had told us what she had wanted, and so we were able to make preparations for her service very easily. Her funeral was beautiful, and many people came to mourn her passing. A few days after the funeral, our grandmother's lawyer contacted my sister and I and asked us to come to his office to hear the reading of the will. Honestly, we had always known that our grandmother had some money, but we never imagined that she would be loaded. Apparently, our grandfather had owned several businesses when he was younger and had sold them and put all that money into investments that he and our grandmother lived off of until they had both passed away. At any rate, now that she had passed, our grandmother had her lawyer divide them up equally and give half to each of us, along with a couple of properties. Both Tasha and I were blown away. We weren't exactly poor, but this inheritance easily made our lives 1,000 times easier. I was given the house that we grew up in, and with some of the inheritance that I had been given, I began to renovate it a bit so that it was more in line with my style. I had contractors and workers coming in and out the house. So many, in fact, that I hadn't learned most of their names until one day I noticed one guy that was working on the bathroom, and he was installing the wrong kind of tile and had painted the walls the wrong color. I was annoyed, of course, but I had just assumed that it was miscommunication, and so I spoke with him to find out where the error had occurred. Hi there. So listen, you're doing great work, but this bathroom is all wrong. The walls are meant to be a much lighter color, and the tiles are also meant to be a light gray and not black like you've installed. I'm sorry, but I'm just doing what the owner told me to do. That's not possible, as I'm the owner, and this isn't what I asked for. Can you show me who told you to do it this way? The man was very confused, but he led me downstairs to the kitchen, where an older man was speaking loudly into his cell phone. The worker pointed at the man and indicated that he was the owner, to which I thanked him and instructed him the proper way that the bathroom was to be redone before finding out who this stranger was. As I walked up to him, the odd man looked at me with contempt and sneered. "Who the hell are you, and what are you doing speaking to the workers? If you don't leave right now, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "And how can I be trespassing on my own property? Who the hell are you, and what gives you the right to tell my workers what to do?" Just then, my mother walked into the kitchen. She looked very worn out and quite a bit heavier than the last time that I had seen her. I knew that this was going to be something very annoying.
Oh, it's you. What are you doing here?
"Hello, Mother. I'm here because I inherited the house. Why are you here, and who is this guy?"
This is my fiance, Toby, and there is no way that this is your house. My mother passed away, and as her only child, that means that everything that was hers is now mine.
That's not how things work, Mom. Grandma left this house to me in her will. She didn't leave anything to you because she knew that you would just squander it and sell it for drugs.
How dare you speak to me that way? This is my house, whether you like it or not.
I wasn't listening to her anymore, and so I took out my phone and called the police. As soon as Toby realized what I was doing, he tried to wrestle the phone away from me. He tried to slap me, and when I kept dodging him, he then tried to kick and punch me. I can only imagine how the conversation sounded on the other end of the telephone. But thankfully, they sent out a squad car that pulled up to the house. Toby and my mother began to look panicked when the police showed up. They looked like they were about to run when the officers pulled them aside and began questioning them. 2 other officers pulled up and began speaking with me, and after I showed them the copy of the will that I had been given, they then began trying to talk to my mother and Toby and get them to leave. This made both of them extremely angry, and both of them began to scream and shout at me at the officers, and Toby even took a swing at the one closest to him. The officer was struck on the chin and fell down, but immediately got back up, and along with the other officers, they threw my mother and Toby into the back of their squad car and drove off. I thought that that was the end of it, but the next day, both of them were back and they were harassing the workers, and when they saw me, Toby charged at me and tried to punch me, but I managed to dodge his blow and shoved him so hard that he fell on his ass. I then called the police and had them taken away again, but this time I made sure that the police took my full report on what had happened, and I filed for a restraining order against them. I wasn't going to take any chances with them. I knew what my mother was capable of. The next day, I got a call from Tasha saying that our mother and Toby were doing the same thing to her at her place. I didn't understand how they managed to be out police custody twice. Our mother was screaming that the will that we both had been witnesses to was a fake, and that if we didn't give her what she felt she was owed, that she would sue us into oblivion, and that she would leave us broke and penniless. Both Tasha and I knew that she was full of crap, and that if she dared to challenge the will that she would lose, and so we went to our grandmother's lawyer and asked them to represent us. Weeks later, we were dragged into court, but it didn't take long for the judge to see that the will was legitimate, and that our mother was merely crazy, and had just assumed that, as her mother only had the one child, that she just automatically inherited everything. The judge tried to explain that that simply was not the case, but our mother began to have a full-blown tantrum and screeched in court that the judge didn't know what he was talking about. After a couple minutes, the judge had the guards put our mother and Toby in jail for being in contempt of the court. They fought like hell, but the officers overpowered them. She was jailed for 1 week. Once she got out, my mother began to call my sister and I, threatening us and constantly trying to get us to give in and give something. At first she wanted our entire inheritance, but the longer we denied her, she slowly began to pivot and just ask for some money instead. Both Tasha and I had agreed that she didn't deserve anything and stonewalled her. More than once, she and Toby would try to come to our homes and intimidate us, but they always left before the police would show up to enforce the restraining order. That is, until I had had enough. Both Toby and my mother showed up late one night and began pounding on my door and screaming that I was an ungrateful and useless son, and started destroying things outside my house. I had been expecting them to show up and had bought a taser gun. As quickly as I could, I opened the front door to my house. When they saw me with a gun, they started running. But I chased after them and tased them both. By the time they were recovering, the police had shown up, and they were finally able to arrest them. Because of their repeated harassment of us, the court decided to sentence them to a year in prison. Few months into their prison sentence, I heard rumors of how my grandmother's ghost will torment my mother in prison. People also told me that when they were finally released, that they had been forced to live on the street. Since they didn't pay their rent because they were in prison, their landlord had sold all their belongings and had evicted them. I have no doubt that the two of them ended up breaking up as well. Although what became of them after that, I have no idea. As for my sister and I, we are just enjoying our lives, and I'm happy to say that my sister is currently engaged, and I have no doubt that I'll be an uncle within a year or so. Thank God we had such an amazing grandmother who was there to support us, and that we weren't reliant on our mother. Thanks for watching. And make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
The wedding wasn't so grand. Only a few people were in attendance. Anyway, mother and daughter moved into our house afterward, and that was the beginning of my time in hell. Selena and Jasmine were evil and two-faced. Whenever my dad was home, they'd both act all nice and calm. But when he wasn't, they rained fire and thunder on me. I would tell my dad, but I didn't want to ruin his happiness. I could see that he was happy with his new marriage, so I took in whatever they did to me. The workers knew about what was happening and weren't in support of it, but they couldn't do anything about it. One time, Jasmine and her mom made me slip on a slippery floor and I sprained my ankle badly. I had to be rushed to the hospital. When my dad asked, I simply told him I slipped because I wasn't looking. They would leave dead rats in my room, put salt in my coffee if I left it for a moment, and even steal money from me. When my mom died, it felt like the end of the world for my dad and I. I couldn't tell which of us was more hurt. She was my mom, but was also my dad's lovely wife. They both managed my dad's companies. During the period when she was sick, I'd been so downcasted. My mom was my best friend. I never held back when confiding in her. She was that mother who knew when to be a parent and when to be a friend. Our home was peaceful because of her patience. She treated the house workers with respect and care. And my father always had a smile on his face because of her. She was smart and assisted him in managing the companies perfectly, and she was also a good wife who showered him with love and affection. Of course, it wasn't just her showing all the love. We also loved her just as much. And when she fell sick, it felt like a cloud of sadness had found its stop over our home. The sickness hadn't hit her once. It made her suffer. It started with little symptoms, until it weakened her, till she could barely stand for long anymore. Then, we were all disturbed. She'd tried to assure us that she didn't need to go to a hospital. However, when it got to that stage, my dad was forced to take her to the hospital. And there, it was discovered that she had cancer. Shockingly, she was at a critical stage. The doctors wondered how it was possible for her to hold up until then. We all knew at that moment that she'd been hiding it from us for a long while. She was immediately admitted to the hospital, and the doctors commenced treatment on her. The house began to grow quiet from then. I was 17 and still in college. Whenever I didn't have classes, I would go to the hospital. It was the same thing with my dad, who would go straight to his wife after work. The workers were also downcast, since the main source of our home's joy was lying on a sickbed. Everyone carried a moody face. My mom spent 3 months at the hospital. During that time, while we both looked after her, my dad ensured that I didn't fall into depression. Every now and then, He would tell me how beautiful I am and try to make me confide my worries in him. Well, I did. A few times. After 3 months, the doctor finally gave us good news. My mom was getting better. We were overjoyed. It was the best news we'd all heard in 3 months. She could speak to us now with her contagious smile. The workers came over to the hospital, and most were moved to happy tears as they saw her back to her old self. Another 2 weeks went by, and it was finally the day of her discharge from the hospital. Neither me nor my dad could stop grinning from ear to ear as we gathered her things. While we did that, she was asleep. Once we were done, I tapped her to wake her up. At first, when she didn't wake up, I thought I was tapping too gently, so I tapped a little harder. But she still didn't budge. I began to get scared and alerted my dad. We shook her together, screaming and yelling for her to wake up. But she didn't. She never did. She died. I nearly went insane. My dad fainted. The doctors were shocked to the bone. How could she die on the day of her discharge? It all didn't seem real until the day of her funeral. That was when it hit me that I'd never see her or speak to her again. That was the most trying time of our lives. Some of the workers had to resign. They couldn't bear living in the house without my mother. It was purely depressing for everyone. Well, as time went on, we began to cope with the fact that she was truly gone. Although we couldn't forget her, we knew she'd be happy if we all went back to our lives. My dad called to the workers who'd left. Some accepted to return, but 2 didn't. They were one of our 5 oldest workers who'd been with us since I was little. They were too used to her and couldn't be in the house without her. My dad understood, of course. Everyone went back to their lives. The workers were nice to me. They would randomly give me comforting words, good meals, and sometimes even hugs. My dad was also doing his best for me, even though he was also hurting. I tried to comfort him too, as I was the only one he had left. He would sometimes break down in front of me, telling me how he would have preferred to take her death. Well, 1 year passed, and we were all back to our lives. Her memories remained rooted to our hearts, though. Another year passed, and another. I was 20 by then, and almost done with college. Life was still going well, and we'd all recovered from the loss of my mother. One day my dad confessed to me that he was dating a woman. He looked so scared, which made me laugh. I encouraged him that I was in support of him having another woman. I was sure he wouldn't be able to love any woman like he loved my mother, so his girlfriend didn't matter to me. He showed me photos of her, and I was impressed. She looked kind and also beautiful. I instantly became eager to see her. My dad agreed, and 2 months later, we had dinner together. When my dad offered to pay, the lady, Selena, stopped him and paid instead, telling him how she didn't want him to go broke because of food. I frowned at that. Well, 7 months after my mom's death, my dad had sold off one of the companies. He'd stopped going to work, and that had taken a toll on the companies. He did so as to use the money in pushing the second company. However, it seemed as if even the second company was crumbling. We only had the house as a trusted property. My mom's parents, as if noticing, stepped in. They asked my dad to focus on bringing his company back to life, while they took care of my expenses. Luckily, everything stabilized in the second company. I suppose Selena knew all of it already, seeing how she treated him. Anyway, we left afterward. We didn't talk about her until about 3 months later, when my dad suddenly told me Selena would be moving into the house. Why? I think it's too much to bring her here, Dad. She's just your girlfriend.
Well, I might have proposed marriage to her.
What? What have you done, Dad? Marriage? Wasn't it too soon to marry the lady? How could he even think about marrying her? I wasn't in support of everything happening, but my dad managed to convince me, and I agreed. Well, we made a deal. If I wasn't comfortable with Selena living with us after 6 months of living with us, then he wouldn't marry her.
But I'm sure you'll be comfortable. Selena is a good person, and I like her.
I hope she was. I could tell my dad was happy with her, and I didn't want to see him unhappy after mourning my mom's death for over 3 years. One day, he suddenly asked me to go on a date with him. When we got to the restaurant, I saw Selena. But she wasn't alone. There was a girl beside her who looked just like her.
This is Jasmine, Selena's daughter. She'll be moving in with us too.
It sounded too much, but I managed to handle my emotions. Throughout the time we spent together, I caught Jasmine glaring at me. Well, her mother seemed quite nice. We went on 3 more dates, and I eventually told my dad to just go ahead and marry her. He seemed so excited to do so, and I thought making him wait 6 months for my approval was too much. The wedding wasn't so grand. Only a few people were in attendance. Anyway, mother and daughter moved into our house afterward, and that was the beginning of my time in hell. Selena and Jasmine were evil and two-faced. Whenever my dad was home, they'd both act all nice and calm. But when he wasn't, they rained fire and thunder on me. I would tell my dad, but I didn't want to ruin his happiness. I could see that he was happy with his new marriage, so I took in whatever they did to me. The workers knew about what was happening and weren't in support of it, but they couldn't do anything about it. One time, Jasmine and her mom made me slip on a slippery floor and I sprained my ankle badly. I had to be rushed to the hospital. When my dad asked, I simply told him I slipped because I wasn't looking. They would leave dead rats in my room, put salt in my coffee if I left it for a moment, and even steal money from me. One time, my dad forgot a few dollar notes on the dining table and they stole it. When he asked, they put the blame on me and told him they saw me taking it. No matter how I tried to defend myself, my dad didn't believe me. He was disappointed that I stole from him. Believe me, Dad, I didn't take it.
Well, 2 people can't be lying against you. I'm disappointed, Susan. You could have just asked me. Your mother and I didn't raise you to be a thief.
I felt so betrayed, but I let it slide and apologized to him. My stepmother and her daughter didn't stop. One day, a maid came to me in my room saying she had something important to show me. Lo and behold, it was a video recording of my stepmother on a video call with a man, all 3 making strategies on how to kill my father and take over his remaining assets. I was shocked and scared. I knew I needed to tell my dad quickly, but I couldn't find the right time. On the day I planned to tell him, I was awaiting his arrival in the living room. My stepmother and sister suddenly came to me and asked me to leave the sitting room. I refused, because I couldn't understand why they'd want that. Without warning, they pounced on me and began punching me, pulling my hair, kicking me. I was in pain and tears. Luckily, before some of the workers could walk in, my aunt opened the door and saw the sight. She was livid and lashed out at them badly. The workers treated my wounds while my aunt called my dad, who returned home about 30 minutes later. My aunt explained what she saw when she came in. Surprisingly, the workers spoke too. They told him about how Jasmine and Selena have been treating me, and how I'd endured it all. I could see the anger in my dad's eyes. The maid also showed him the video, and he immediately went pale with disbelief and shock.
Is this true, Selena?
I couldn't lie anymore. I told him everything. I didn't want you to be hurt. That's why I never said anything. My dad was so angry. He turned to Selena and sent a slap across her cheek.
The both of you, get your things and leave my house, now.
They were visibly afraid, as they'd never seen him like that before. They hurriedly packed their things and rushed out. The next week, my dad divorced her and filed a case of bullying and attempted murder against her. At the court, we got to know that Selena's brother was an old business partner of my dad, and they'd both had a bad fallout. She and her daughter had entered our lives for revenge. Anyway, they were both found guilty and given a 10-year term each, and 6 months community service after discharge to teach them a lesson. I was satisfied with that. Her family had denied being aware, as they needed to protect their reputation. So Selena and Jasmine were alone and abandoned. Not really alone. At least they had cellmates in prison who continuously bullied them, according to what I heard. As for my dad, he didn't remarry, as he couldn't trust another woman. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
The occasional slapping turned into the occasional punch. It finally came to a head when my father came home one night and gave me an ultimatum. Okay, enough is enough. Chad, you are either going to contribute to this family or you will no longer be welcome in this house. What do you mean, Dad? I need a car, so you have two choices. You can either go out and steal one for me, or you can go out and live on the street and never return. If you return here without a car, then I'll kill you. Do you understand me? Hi there, my name is Chad, and I have a really great story to tell you. It didn't start off great though, but I promise you that it has a happy ending. To start with, let me just say that my parents are just about the worst people you can imagine. There are probably worse people out there in the world, but I had the misfortune of being born into their family. I was the youngest of 3 children. My older brother Jack and older sister Deborah were just like my parents. Growing up, literally everyone in the family would pick on me. When I was only 6, I learned to never ask my family for anything. Hey Dad, can we get a dog? A dog? What makes you think that I would buy you a dog? I don't even want to pay for your food. Why would I pay for a dog's food as well?
What an absolute idiot. With what money are you going to pay for it?
Money? I don't have any money. I thought maybe Mom and Dad would pay for it. You selfish little brat. I really wish your mother hadn't given birth to you. My father then smacked the back of my head hard enough that it made me fall over. For a few seconds I saw stars, while Deborah just stood there and laughed at me. Once I regained my senses, she then sucker punched me in the stomach and began laughing again before walking away. I was so confused, but I knew from a young age that my family was cruel, and for no better reason than because they thought it was fun. On top of that, both my parents constantly would break the law, but never anything that would get them into a lot of trouble. For instance, my mother would regularly shoplift. She would even have my brother and sister act as a distraction so that people wouldn't notice her put things into her purse. Sometimes it would be stuff we would need, but not always. As for my dad, he would sometimes go into crowded areas and would pickpocket, sometimes making hundreds of dollars in a couple hours. He would often bring my brother and sister with him as well, when he did for the same reason as my mother. The two would make a scene, and people would stare at them, not knowing that they were being robbed while they were looking at my siblings.
Why doesn't Chad ever come and help us when we go out, Dad?
That's because he is incredibly useless, unlike the rest of us. He's too good to break the law. The only time I ever tried to use him to distract people, he immediately started crying and gave up before I could get a single wallet. Well, I'm sorry, but I happen to think stealing is wrong. I guess I was just born into the wrong family. You're damn right you were. You are such a disappointment. I never thought that one of my own children could be such a complete loser. Their words hurt even more than the physical abuse that they would throw my way. Sometimes it would just be a slap, but other times it was worse. Everyone in family other than me smoked, and they would put out their lit cigarettes on my arm. To this day, I have scars on my arms from all the burn marks from them. The older I got, the worse they would lash out at me as well. The occasional slapping turned into the occasional punch. It finally came to a head when my father came home one night and gave me an ultimatum. Okay, enough is enough. Chad, you are either going to contribute to this family, or you will no longer be welcome in this house. What do you mean, Dad? I need a car, so you have two choices. You can either go out and steal one for me, or you can go out and live on the street and never return. If you return here without a car, then I'll kill you. Do you understand me? I nodded, but I knew that there was no way that I could do as he was instructing me. I didn't know how to steal a car, let alone did I even want to, but living on the street. I was only 16 when he gave me this ultimatum, and the idea of living alone on the street made my heart race so much, I thought it was going to burst out of my chest. I walked out the front door knowing that there was no way that I could go through with it. I walked down the street and hid behind some bushes and waited until 9 a.m. the next day, when the rest of my family left the house to go somewhere. While they were gone, I snuck in and grabbed as much of my belongings and some camping gear that I could carry, and left again before they got back. I really had no idea what to do, but I had the camping gear, and so I went out to a local forest and found a secluded spot and made a cozy campsite. In the morning, I went fishing, and I was able to catch a few fish to eat, so I was at least not starving. I lived like that for a couple weeks when one day, I came back to camp after fishing and found a man sitting by my tent. He had noticed that I had been living in the woods for some time, and he asked if I needed help. At first, I was reluctant to admit the truth, but after a few minutes of talking, I told him my life story. As it turned out, he had grown up in a similar home, and he had escaped it and eventually became a park ranger. He was living in a cabin not far away, and there was an empty cabin next to his, and I could live there if I wanted. But the deal was that I would keep going to school. I couldn't believe my good luck, and so I accepted. From then on, Carl, the park ranger that helped me, would give me groceries once a week and some money to help me out, and although he would check up on me, he also gave me a lot of freedom. It was great. I was living in the woods still, and got to enjoy nature while also continuing my education. Eventually, I graduated high school, and with Carl's help, I applied to various schools for geology. I managed to get some scholarships and graduated at the top of my class. With my newfound knowledge of geology, I returned home to my cabin and spoke with Carl. He told me about some parcel of land far to the north that was being sold for a very low price, and he wondered if I could have a look at it. He was interested in making an investment and buying it, but wanted to know if it was worth doing so. And so I went and had a look, and sure enough, I knew that it would be a perfect place for a gold mine, and I told Carl as much. He ended up buying the parcel and hired me on as his partner and opened up a mine there. Within weeks, we were finding tons of gold and making more money than we knew what to do with. Carl ended up retiring from his job, and both of us built massive cabins along a lake that we loved. From that point on, we would scout other sites and continue to build our empire. Life was good, but of course my parents and siblings eventually found out that rather than dying on the streets that I had, instead made something of myself, and my father called me.
Hey there, bud. So I heard that you ended up becoming rich.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good for myself. What do you want?
Well, we're family. I would assume that you were going to share your wealth with the rest of us. Or are we going to have to come out to that pretty cabin of yours and just take what you owe us?
How do you know where I live?
Are you kidding me? We've known for a while. Listen, if you know what's good for you, then you'll just give us our share. Otherwise, we'll come over and beat it out of you.
If you come out here, then I'll make sure that you'll regret it. I knew that they were going to be idiots and try to break into my house, but I lived in the woods, and people were the least of my concerns. I had quite the security system along with animal traps surrounding my property. The next night, I heard a howl coming from the woods which sounded like someone crying out in pain. I grabbed my rifle and went to see who it was, and as I approached, I saw that my brother had stepped in a bear trap. The rest of my family had managed to free him, but his leg was all torn up. Without hesitation, I called the police and told them I had 4 people on my property that were trying to attack my home. Hey, I called the police and they'll be here soon. You can either try to flee or get arrested. It's your choice.
Are you threatening us?
You're damn right I am. You people are crazy and dangerous. I don't want you anywhere near me. The sounds of police sirens could suddenly be heard, and my family scattered into the woods as they tried to run away. My brother, with his wounded leg, barely got very far, and was caught first while the rest ran straight through an area that was covered in poison oak and ended up getting covered with it. My father was the worst. He tried to fight back against the police, and they were forced to tase him. After that night, my family was arrested and were charged with assault, since all 4 of them resisted arrest. They all ended up getting scars from the poison oak that they were covered with, since none of them received any kind of treatment for it until well after they were scratching themselves raw. My brother got it the worst though, and his leg became infected, and he ended up having to get it amputated, in order to ensure that my family faced as much punishment as possible. I went down to the police station and told them all about how my family had been breaking the law for years. With my testimony, the police were able to build a case against all 4 of my family members. The police had dozens of cases with no suspects, but, with my help, they were able to determine that my family were guilty of quite a bit. By the time they went to trial, each of them was looking at over 20 years behind bars because of all the different crimes that they had committed. Shortly after the trials, a news station contacted me about what had happened, and I told them my story, and they put it on the news nationwide, and it got so much attention that a movie studio wanted to turn my life story into a movie. As a result, I ended up selling the story of my life for a hefty sum of money, and when the movie came out, my family was roasted by people online. Everyone around the country knew just what kind of monsters my family were, and I knew that even when they eventually got out of prison, that they would be forced to leave the country, or else be attacked and harassed by all the people that had seen the movie. For me, it was great. Not only had I escaped their terrible influence and toxicity, but now I also had a way of making sure that they would never bother me again. It was even better than a restraining order, although I did get one of those as well. So, in the end, I think things worked out pretty well for me and my family got what they deserved. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
After we eat, Mom makes sure to tell the staff that it's Emily's birthday, and they bring out a big chocolate cake that Mom custom orders beforehand, with Emily's face plastered in the frosting. I hate chocolate, and every year they get it. We're twins. Why does it only ever have Emily's face on the cake? It's my birthday too.
When you get a prettier face, you can be on the cake too.
Even though she's my twin sister, my family always thought Emily was better than me. For whatever reason, my family was really shallow and placed a lot of value on looks. Growing up, Emily never had any of the problems that I did. She was always fit, never had any acne, and had no problem making friends wherever she went. She wasn't just perfect with her looks. She was always top of her class and the top player in any sport. She was everything that I wasn't, and they always reminded me of it.
It boggles my mind how you and Emily are identical sisters, but no one would ever tell that from looking at the two of you.
Good thing one of you got your mother's good looks and my brain. You should study more to be more like her.
We're identical twins. How can you say we don't look alike?
Your nose is definitely bigger.
This went on for years, and despite knowing that she was the favorite, I would still try to impress my parents, to make them acknowledge my existence. I couldn't compete with all the beauty pageants that Emily won or the grades that she brought home to show them, but I still tried anyway. Around age 14, I started spending more time at after-school activities, so I wouldn't have to be around my family so much. I enrolled myself in as many activities as I could. I was happy with how busy I became and didn't have time to think about my parents and Emily. But it quickly backfired on me. In my pursuit of finding who I was outside of my family, I had forgotten how popular Emily was at school. In all of the activities, when I would walk in the room, everyone's eyes would light up, thinking I was her.
Emily, I thought you said you couldn't make the drama audition because of the volleyball tournament.
Did you get enough sleep last night? You look off. Your nose is a little swollen too. Did you bump your nose or something?
I'm not Emily. I'm her twin.
Oh, thank goodness. I was really worried there for a second. I thought something horrible had happened to her to make her look like that.
Most days after school, I would lock myself in my room, trying to forget that I was a twin. I would lay awake thinking about what my life would have been like had I been born 2 minutes later and her 2 minutes earlier. Would she live the life I was having now? Or was she truly better than me like everyone else said she was? Every summer, my parents would take a trip to their lakeside house, and they would take Emily with them. They would always leave me at the house, saying that I needed to stay to take care of our family dog. When they first started doing this, I would get upset at their stupid excuse to leave me behind and forget that they had an ugly daughter. As I got older, I started to appreciate the time alone that I would get away from them. I would crank music up loud and let it echo throughout the house, dancing as hard as I could. Only Angus could see me anyways. He would lay in his dog bed and watch me as I sang and danced in joy. Then it occurred to me, is this what my life be like without Emily in it? Without her always looming over with how much better she was, and without my parents constantly telling me? My life changed with that thought as a new goal formed within me. I had to get away from them, whatever the cost. I was fairly lucky for most of high school to not have her in most of my classes, but my luck ran out junior year. We had biology together. Everyone would flock to her when it came time to do class projects, and I was often stuck with someone who mistook me for her. There was a particularly challenging partner project that our teacher, Ms. Rodnick, assigned in the middle of the year. By this point, everyone knew who the smart students were, and who were the ones you wanted to avoid if you wanted a good grade. Me and the girl who sat next to me were the students to avoid.
Why doesn't anyone ever want to partner with you? Me, I can understand, but you get good grades.
That's the first time I've ever heard someone call a D a good grade.
Still better than what I've been getting. Do you want to partner up for the project? We've been sitting next to each other all year, and I don't think I even know your name. I just know it's not Emily.
Tanya.
Hannah. For the record, I don't get what the big deal is about your sister. Frankly, I think anyone could look however they wanted if they learned how to do makeup.
Makeup, you say? From that point on, Hannah and I were inseparable. She was the first person who thought I was smart. The frosting on the cake? She didn't like Emily. We would do everything together. The more I got to know her, the more we found in common with one another. She had moved from another state because she was so badly bullied at her old school. She told me that she saw a lot of herself in me when I explained about Emily and my parents. For the first time in my life, I had found someone who seemed to actually care about me. She was like the stereotypical sister that I would see in the movies. We went shopping and talked about boys. I told her that I could never really think about anyone like that because I was so unattractive. At this, she became angry. "No one is ugly, least of all you," she said as she shook me. "You're sleeping over tonight, and we're binge-watching makeup tutorials until you can figure out how to get that thought out of your head." We did this for weeks, practicing makeup on each other, making each other look like all these YouTube makeup influencers. It was during these sleepovers that I first experienced the sensation of looking in the mirror and feeling beautiful. I was so relieved and happy that I cried while Hannah patted my back lovingly. It was then that I became passionate about making other people feel the same way, making others feel beautiful with makeup. I began to practice on myself at home more and more regularly. As I was walking out the door one day to go to school, my mom was particularly nice to me.
Why are you so quiet this morning, dear? You always say goodbye to me before you leave.
I never say goodbye to you.
Tanya, I thought you were Emily. Get out of here. You're late.
It was a bittersweet moment then. I had gotten good enough at makeup for my mom to confuse me with Emily, but still. Senior year, Hannah did something for me that I will never forget. My birthday was coming up quickly, and Hannah wanted to do something to celebrate. I told her I wanted to ignore it. My birthday is usually the day that I hate the most. Every year, they take both of us to a fancy restaurant. It's always humiliating. Emily always get an amazingly beautiful birthday dress for the occasion, and I'm stuck wearing the dress that she got last year that she doesn't want anymore. Even though we're twins, our bodies aren't quite the same. While the dresses look amazing on her, they fit me awkwardly, with loose bunches of fabric everywhere. To make matters worse, Emily would always soak her old dress in vinegar before giving it to me. I could never get rid of the smell no matter how many times I washed it. It's the only dress I could possibly wear to the birthday dinner, and I make other restaurant goers gag as I walk by. The three of them think it's hilarious and laugh as we walk to the table. After we eat, Mom makes sure to tell the staff that it's Emily's birthday, and they bring out a big chocolate cake that Mom custom orders beforehand, with Emily's face plastered in the frosting. I hate chocolate, and every year they get it. We're twins. Why does it only ever have Emily's face on the cake? It's my birthday too.
When you get a prettier face, you can be on the cake too.
I told Hannah about why I hated my birthdays, and she became furious.
You know what? You're getting a new birthday. The day before your birthday is all about you. You were born first, so you should celebrate first anyways. Keep your day open, okay?
I was skeptical, but she had already proven that I could trust her, so I agreed. She was really adamant about it. The weeks that led up to my birthday, I grew more and more curious. I would ask Hannah for more details, but she would just smile at me. The day before my birthday finally came, and I had no idea what to expect. I kept checking my phone for text messages from Hannah, but there was nothing. I heard Emily squealing downstairs all of a sudden. "Oh my gosh, you guys got me a limo this year?" I looked out the window and a long black limo laid in our street. Before my parents could respond, Emily ran out to the limo and tried to open the door. It was locked. Hannah popped her head up from inside and yelled to me, "Get your beautiful butt in here, Tanya." Emily stood with her jaw dropped. As I ran down the stairs, my parents tried to stop me. "Where are you going? Where did you get the money to rent a limo?" I ignored them as I rushed through the door. Outside, Emily was motionless as Hannah stepped outside of the limo, brandishing the most beautiful dress I had ever seen. "Is this for me?"
Of course. I had my dad custom fit it to fit you perfectly. No vinegar smell either.
Where did you get this limo?
Oh, my brother owns his own limo company, and he let me borrow this one to take you to your surprise.
We got into the limo together and drove away from my house. My parents stood on the porch watching me drive away. Emily stood in the parking lot, her mouth still ajar with her eyes still wide in disbelief. So what's the surprise?
Remember how you did my mom's friend's makeup? Her name is Justina Caldone. I didn't tell you because I thought you would be nervous, but she's actually a successful fashion designer who was looking for a makeup artist for her latest show. It was like a job interview, really. She was really impressed. We're going to the show now. You're doing the model's makeup.
What? Really? That was one of the most magical nights of my life. I had never seen so many people in such extravagant clothing before. The dress that Hannah got me fit wonderfully. As I moved to each model, I felt almost as if I was gliding across the floor. Each one was super impressed with their makeup and told me how skilled I was and how beautiful I looked. After the show ended, Hannah presented me with a giant vanilla cake with my face on it. I never cried so much in one night before. It was a happy cry. While the two of us were eating the cake, Justina asked if I would become her full-time makeup artist. I readily agreed. Immediately after graduation, I moved out of my parents' house. For the next 5 years, I traveled with her abroad, working alongside her. My face was always on the cover of some magazine talking about what an up-and-comer I was. Eventually, I got enough traction to start my own makeup company. It's doing great. I'd never in my wildest dreams have thought I'd be where I am today. I don't think my parents or Emily thought I ever would either. 7 years after Hannah gave me that new birthday, I received a call. Hello.
Is this Tanya? It's your mother.
Hmm?
Listen, I know we didn't always treat you the best growing up, but look at where you are now. We're in a bit of trouble now and could use some help.
Mom explained that shortly after I moved out, Emily became obsessed with her image. She became addicted to plastic surgery and would have Mom and Dad pay for the procedures. They quickly cut her off and refused to pay, so she would steal the money from them. Mom and Dad are penniless now, and they're at risk of losing their house. Emily ran away after a botched nose job surgery, and they have no idea where she is.
Can you help us? Everywhere I look, I see how successful you are. I know we weren't the kindest to you growing up, but I think if you look in your heart, you'll see that we are the reason you've gotten to be where you are. You owe us. I'm your mother. This is the least you could do.
I am where I am because I worked my butt off to get away from you. I achieved that. Me. Good luck with the house, Linda. I hung up before she could respond, and I never heard from her again. A few weeks later, I heard my parents couldn't afford to pay their mortgage. They were kicked out of the house and are now living on the streets. They both work in a warehouse lifting boxes every day and are being bullied by the young, agile workers because they are slow and old. As for Emily, I saw on the news that she committed suicide after she was laughed at for her appearance and bullied. I have a new life now without them, a better one, and that's the best revenge I can get. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.